Exactly 3 weeks ago, French President Emmanuel Macron called for surprise parliamentary elections in France, a direct response to the success of right-wing candidates in the European Parliament election. Macron hoped French voters would reject the far right, and so far that hope has backfired. In the first round of elections over the weekend, the far-right National Rally Party earned the highest tally of votes. A coalition of left-wing groups came in second. Macron's centrist alliance finished third. But there is more voting to come. A second round takes place Sunday. The vast number of seats in Parliament are still up for grabs, and Macron is calling on voters across the political spectrum to prevent a far-right majority in the second round. Let's bring in Max Bergmann. He's the director of the Europe, Russia, and Eurasia program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Max, thanks for being with us. What do we mean in this case about, when we're just talking about France, what do we mean when we say far right?
Well, so the far right National Rally Party led by Marine Le Pen is pretty similar, I think, in some ways to the modern U.S. Republican Party in the sense that she is running on anti-immigration platform, very much adheres to many of the things you hear from Donald Trump in terms of economic protectionism, a revived nationalism, so concern about Europe in this sense. Wants France to be more independent of the European Union and skeptical of allies, skeptical of NATO, and protectionist in the sense that believing in higher tariffs, in opposing free trade in many respects, and opposing the trade agreements that the EU has done. So the National Rally would, I think, bring in potentially real change. And what is most concerning, I think, to many people in France are particularly the French citizens that are not of white background, that are from Africa, from other regions. There's no secret of Marine Le Pen and National Rally's sort of disdain for what she sees as sort of in some ways fake French citizens, and wants to get rid of birthright citizenship and other elements of what are really critical to the French state, or at least how France has perceived itself historically.
Is it possible, Max, to know why the Le Pen and that movement is gaining momentum? In other words, is it that racial piece? Is it just anti-Macron sentiment? Is it just the general post-COVID malaise that's bouncing around the world? Do we know?
It's a great question, and I think it's all of the above. I think what you have to remember with Emmanuel Macron is that he essentially broke French politics when he won in 2017. That Macron ran as a centrist candidate, created his own party, and traditionally France was a party of really the center-left and the center-right, and Macron created a party of the center. And when you do that in democratic politics, well, opposition has to come from somewhere, and where it came, at least in the last French presidential elections in 2022, was from the far right and Marine Le Pen, and from the far left. And what we're seeing is that Le Pen has gained ground, that has sort of normalized her positions to some degree, has softened on some areas, moved to the center a little bit, but is really winning over actually many sort of far left voters. Former communists, for instance, which were quite plentiful in France. And so the problem is the center can't hold, and that's what we saw with this election, is that Macron's party finished third. There wasn't a strong base for it. And so in some ways, we're seeing really the revival of a two-party system. The question is, where does the center go? Does the center back the left, or does it back the right? And Macron is trying to get the center to back the left in the second round of voting. And I think that should serve to at least blunt the gains of the far right.
And in the less than a minute we have left, Max, can you give us a sense of what we should read or connect to the rest of what's happening in Europe in terms of the rise of the right? Or would you caution us against over-reading the rise of the right and making grand conclusions about the direction for Europe?
I would caution to some degree. I think what we're seeing is a real anti-incumbency reaction, especially to leaders that have been in power for a long time. And I think you're going to see that also in the UK when they have elections on July 4th. And that's not going to usher in a right-wing government, but a center-left Labour government is likely to return. But then you take a country like Germany, where the German coalition is very unpopular. So I think it's a very mixed picture. And the far right is clearly making gains, but the far right is also shifting and changing to adapt, especially in Europe, to move a bit more to the center. Maybe not fully, but a bit more. And I think it's therefore hard to sort of draw grand conclusions, except for the fact that I think people are generally annoyed post-COVID, and particularly with increasing cost of living in Europe from the energy crisis.
Max Bergmann with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much, Max.
Thanks.